language lovers, and welcome back to Your English, Your Journey, Confident English Now. I'm Kei.
And I'm Leo.
So, you know that feeling when you're pushing towards a goal? Maybe it's getting fitter, learning something new, or making moves in your career.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, things are clicking, right? You see real progress.
Yeah, that initial rush.
Exactly. Then all of a sudden, it's like you've hit this invisible wall.
Yeah. The plateau.
That's what we're diving into today.
Right.
The frustrating, but completely normal experience of hitting a plateau. Based on the articles and your own notes you shared, we're going to unpack this.
It really is a universal thing, like your sources highlight. That initial surge of improvement we often see, it definitely can taper off. Sometimes quite dramatically, actually.
Right. And it's so natural to feel a bit deflated then, when those quick wins just sort of disappear.
Totally. We've all been there.
Absolutely. I think we all recognize that dip in motivation, that little seed of doubt that starts to sprout. Am I good enough? Is this even working anymore?
Yeah.
Your notes really resonated with that feeling, like putting in all the effort but not seeing the scale budge, or feeling like you're stuck on the same French verbs week after week.
And those feelings are completely understandable. As several of the articles you sent point out, you might start questioning your whole approach, maybe. Maybe look around at others who seem to be zooming past you and worry that you're somehow, fundamentally stuck.
Yeah, the comparison trap.
Right. It's just really important to acknowledge that these emotions, they're a normal part of the process. They really are.
But here's where it gets really interesting, looking at what you've sent. This isn't about finding some, instant hack to just blast through a plateau.
No quick fixes here.
Instead, we're going to explore the underlying reasons why plateaus happen, how maybe shifting our perspective can be a bit of a game changer, and some really practical strategies to keep moving forward, even when it feels like you're, wading through treacle.
Right. Because, as some of your sources suggest, that feeling of being stuck, it isn't always negative. It can actually be a sign of consolidation, or maybe a nudge that it's time for a fresh approach.
Consolidation, okay.
Exactly. Your materials touch on the logical and even physiological factors at play here.
Okay.
Think about fitness, for instance. Initially, the body responds pretty readily to a new training routine, right? But over time, it adapts.
It gets used to it.
Precisely. As one of your articles mentioned, things like muscle fiber recruitment patterns become more efficient with exercises you do all the time.
Ah, okay.
So getting further progress often requires more targeted or just different stimuli.
Variety.
Gotcha.
And it's a similar story with learning, too, isn't it? Your notes brought up the idea of the learning curve.
Absolutely. You make really rapid progress initially, grasping the basics, the fundamentals. That's the steep climb.
Yeah.
But as you start tackling more complex ideas, stuff that requires deeper understanding and more nuanced skills,
Right.
the rate of visible progress naturally slows down. The curve starts to flatten out.
Okay, that makes sense.
And what's fascinating here, and something that several of your sources really emphasize, is this concept of unconscious competence.
Unconscious competence. Tell me more.
Well, think of it like when you're driving a car now versus when you were first learning.
Okay.
Now you just do it, right?
Yeah.
You're performing the skill effectively without actively thinking about every single step, clutch, gear, signal.
Right, it's automatic.
Exactly. That internalization process, as your notes describe it, can feel like a plateau because that really conscious rapid learning phase has passed.
Okay, so things are still happening under the hood, so to speak.
Precisely. Underneath the surface, your brain and body are still solidifying those skills. It's almost like a tree developing this really strong root system before you see lots of new branches and leaves above ground.
That's a great image.
So the key takeaway is, don't mistake a lack of visible progress for a lack of actual progress. Things are still happening.
Okay, that's really helpful. Let's maybe unpack some of the common missteps people make when they hit these plateaus, based on the articles you shared.
Sure.
One that really stands out is just trying to brute force your way through, just cranking up the intensity without actually changing the strategy.
Oh, yeah. The more is always better fallacy.
Right. It's like repeatedly using the same wrong key on a lock, but just turning it harder each time, somehow expecting the door to magically open.
That's a perfect analogy. It rarely works.
Right.
Another common pitfall, which your notes also touched upon, is just giving up too soon.
Yeah, discouragement sets in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When those easy early gains dry up, it's so easy to get discouraged and think, well, maybe this is it. Maybe I've reached my limit. And then there's the tendency to fixate only on that big, distant end goal the final outcome.
Right, the marathon finish line.
And lose sight of the actual consistent daily actions.
Yeah.
The stuff that's actually going to get you there, the process.
And it's so important to remember, like several of your sources point out, progress rarely follows that smooth upward line we imagine, does it?
Oh, almost never. We often have this idealized picture in our minds, but the reality, it's much more cyclical. Messier.
How so?
Well, you typically have periods of rapid improvement, then you hit a plateau, maybe for a while, and sometimes you even see a slight dip
Okay.
before you get the next surge forward. It's almost never just a straight line up.
That's really crucial to remember, especially as one of the articles you included mentioned when we're looking at other people's progress.
Absolutely. This directly relates to that caution against comparing your own messy, real journey to other people's highlight reels, especially online.
Right. Social media perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What you see there is often just this carefully curated snapshot of their successes. It completely leaves out the inevitable struggles, the setbacks, and yes, the plateaus they've definitely navigated too.
Okay, so if we shouldn't only be looking for those big, obvious improvements, how else can we define progress during these phases? Because let's face it, it feels like we're just treading water, and that can be so demotivating.
That's such a crucial shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And something your notes address directly. Improvement isn't solely about hitting bigger numbers or, getting a certificate.
Okay.
It can also be about building resilience, that grit, that ability to keep going when things get tough.
Right, sticking with it.
Yeah. It's about developing greater consistency. Just showing up, even on the days when you really don't feel like it, that's progress.
Okay.
It's about gaining a deeper understanding of the fundamentals, maybe refining your technique in a small way, or even just finding more enjoyment in the process itself. That counts too.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about shifting focus maybe from those big outcome goals like, I don't know, losing 20 pounds or becoming fluent in Spanish by Christmas.
Right, the end results.
What some of your sources call process goals. Could you elaborate on that distinction a bit?
Absolutely. Process goals are the daily controllable actions that you commit to. They're things you do.
Okay, likes.
So instead of saying, I want to run a marathon in 6 months, that's the outcome. A process goal would be something like, I will run 3 times this week for at least 30 minutes. Or, I will follow my training plan each day.
Focusing on the doing.
Exactly. Focusing on these process goals keeps you engaged in the present moment, and it gives you a sense of accomplishment right now, today, even when that ultimate goal feels really far away or stalled.
And I really like the idea, which came up in your notes, about celebrating the small stuff, those seemingly insignificant wins.
Yes, definitely.
Like sticking to your practice schedule for a whole week without missing a day, or finally pushing past a bout of procrastination to get started.
Or understanding a concept that was fuzzy before, just a little bit better than yesterday.
Yeah. These are all legitimate improvements that we often just brush past or don't even notice, right?
Exactly. We're so focused on the big leap, we forget about the small steps. It's about recognizing that true mastery, as many of your sources imply, is rarely a sprint. It's almost always a marathon.
Right.
And plateaus are just, they're part of that long-distance journey. They really test your patience and your commitment.
Okay.
That's where the idea of micro-progress, which was highlighted in one of the articles, comes in so handy.
Micro progress. Tiny steps.
Tiny steps. Instead of striving for these huge leaps, can you just identify one tiny incremental improvement you can make today? One extra rep at the gym,
Right.
one new word learned, one slightly more polished sentence written. Those small steps, they really accumulate significantly over time. It's compound interest for skills.
Compound interest for skills, I like that.
Yeah.
And this all connects, I guess, to cultivating what's often called a growth mindset, which several of your sources discuss.
Yes, absolutely central.
Viewing these challenges, these plateaus, not as like brick walls or indicators of failure,
Right. Not as proof you can't do it.
but more as valuable opportunities, chances to learn, to adapt, and ultimately to grow stronger from it.
Exactly. Reframing those setbacks as crucial feedback. Data, really. Information that can actually steer you in a better, more effective direction.
And alongside that growth mindset, practicing self-compassion seems vital, as your notes emphasize.
Oh, incredibly important. It's so easy to beat yourself up, right? To get into that negative self-talk loop.
Yeah, I should be further along. Why can't I get this?
Exactly. But that kind of internal pressure, it's usually really counterproductive. It just drains your energy and makes it even harder to stay motivated. Be kind to yourself during the struggle.
Okay, so based on the materials you've shared, let's get practical. What are some concrete steps we can actually take when we find ourselves smack bang on a plateau? Understanding it is one thing, but navigating through it.
Right, the what now part.
Yeah.
Well, a crucial first step, often highlighted in your sources, is to just step back. Take a breath and critically analyze your current methods.
Okay, like a self-audit.
Kind of. Ask yourself honestly, are you essentially expecting different results while just repeating the exact same actions over and over?
Good question.
If the answer is yes, well, then it's probably time to introduce some variety. Shake things up.
Okay, so what does introducing variety practically look like? Can you give us some specific examples?
Yeah.
Drawing from the material.
Certainly. It really depends on the pursuit, but generally it might mean changing the stimulus.
Okay.
If you're focused on fitness, this could involve switching up your exercises, maybe try something completely new, or alter the sets, the reps, the tempo, even just your rest periods between sets.
Right, tweak the variables.
Exactly. If you're learning a language, maybe try different learning tools.
Yeah.
If you only use an app, try finding conversation partners.
Yeah.
If you only read, try listening more.
Mix it up.
Mix it up.
Yeah.
And sometimes, as one of your articles pointed out, it's actually beneficial to go back, revisit the fundamentals.
Oh, interesting. Go backwards to go forwards.
Sometimes. If you're feeling stuck on something advanced, it might indicate that there's a foundational skill, something basic, that maybe wasn't quite solidified and needs a bit more refinement.
That makes sense, like in music, right? Sometimes going back to just practicing scales or basic chords can unlock progress in those really complex pieces later on.
Precisely that. What other strategies did your sources highlight?
Well, seeking external feedback came up quite a bit. Getting fresh eyes on the situation.
Ah, yes. Super valuable. Talk to a coach, a teacher, a mentor, or even just someone with more experience in whatever you're doing.
Why is that so helpful?
Well, they might be able to spot blind spots you have, things you're doing wrong or inefficiently that you just can't see yourself. Or they might just offer completely different perspectives or ideas you hadn't even considered.
A fresh pair of eyes.
Exactly. And several of your sources also emphasize the importance of deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. Okay, what's that distinct from just practicing?
Good question.
Yeah.
It's not just about mindlessly going through the motions, putting in the hours. It's about actively focusing on your specific weaknesses, the things you find hardest, and consciously, intentionally working to improve those specific things. It's targeted effort.
Okay, focused, intentional work on weak points.
Yeah.
Got it. Now, something that feels counterintuitive, but your notes remind us is critical, is rest and recovery.
Yes, so often overlooked, especially when we feel stuck.
Right, because you feel like you should be pushing harder, not resting. Why is rest so important then?
Well, it's multifaceted. Rest isn't just about letting your muscles repair after physical activity, though that's obviously vital.
Sure.
It's also crucial for mental recovery. When you're learning something new, your brain actually needs downtime to consolidate that information and sort of file it away properly. Sleep is huge for this.
Memory consolidation.
Exactly. And in creative fields or even demanding jobs, as one of your articles discusses, burnout is a massive risk if you don't allow for adequate breaks and mental downtime. You just fry your circuits.
Okay, so rest is productive.
Highly productive. And related to that, I've heard about the benefits of cross-training, even in areas beyond physical fitness. Could you explain how that idea applies more broadly, based on what you've read?
Yeah, that came up too. Engaging in related but different activities.
How does that help?
Well, your sources suggest it can be incredibly beneficial. It might spark new ideas by exposing you to different ways of thinking or doing things.
Nice.
It could help you develop complementary skills that actually feed back into your main pursuit. Or sometimes, honestly, it just provides a refreshing mental break from banging your head against the same wall.
A mental palate cleanser.
Exactly. Sometimes just stepping away briefly, doing something related but different, can give you renewed energy and a totally fresh perspective when you come back to the main thing. It's really about listening to yourself, being attuned to your own needs, both physical and mental. And what about the people factor? Connecting with others. How can that help us navigate a plateau, according to the materials we're looking at?
Hugely important. External accountability can be a massive motivator for some people.
Like having a gym buddy.
Exactly. Or finding a training partner, joining a study group, working with a coach, knowing someone else is expecting you, or checking in, can provide that extra push to keep going, especially when your own internal drive is maybe flagging a bit.
Right, keeps you showing up.
Yeah. And beyond accountability, there's the support of a community. Just sharing your challenges, your frustrations with others who actually understand what you're experiencing.
Yeah, knowing you're not alone.
that can be incredibly validating. Plus, they might even offer new insights or practical solutions you hadn't thought of yourself, bouncing ideas around.
And creating a positive environment around yourself seems key too.
Definitely. Surrounding yourself with supportive, encouraging individuals rather than, naysayers or hyper-competitive types, that energy matters.
This has been incredibly insightful, really helpful stuff. As we begin to wrap things up, what are some final thoughts on how to really maintain motivation and actually work through these plateaus in the long term, drawing from the key ideas in your sources?
Well, a recurring theme, a really powerful one in your materials, is the importance of reconnecting with your initial why.
Your core motivation.
Exactly. Why did you start this journey in the first place? What was the spark? Remembering that underlying passion, that purpose, can be a potent source of fuel when you're feeling stuck or drained.
Right, revisiting that initial excitement.
Yeah. Visualizing your future success, picturing the person you aspire to become through this process, that can also provide a renewed sense of direction and pull you forward. And fundamentally, it's essential to recognize that true mastery, as so many sources point out, isn't some final destination you arrive at. It's an ongoing process, a journey of continuous learning and growth. Plateaus are just part of that terrain.
And there's definitely something to be said for just persisting, isn't there? Simply keeping going, even when the immediate rewards aren't obvious.
Oh, absolutely. Maintaining that positive attitude, or at least a determined one, during a plateau, that demonstrates real mental fortitude, real commitment.
Yeah, mental toughness.
There's a genuine sense of accomplishment that comes from consistently putting in the effort, day after day, even without that instant gratification we often crave. It builds resilience, it builds character.
That's true.
And then, when you eventually do break through that plateau, and you often will if you keep adapting and persisting, the satisfaction is so much greater. Because you've proven to yourself that you can navigate the tough spots, that you can overcome challenges.
So, to kind of summarize, based on our deep dive into your materials, hitting plateaus, totally normal, expected part of any meaningful journey.
Yep, part of the deal.
It's vital to understand the underlying reasons, maybe physiological, maybe learning curve related, to adjust your mindset, redefine progress, focus on the process, not just the outcome, employ practical strategies, introduce variety, maybe revisit fundamentals, definitely seek feedback, and always keep your initial why somewhere in view.
Well put.
And throughout it all, maybe the most important things are patience and self-compassion. Remembering progress is usually a marathon, not a sprint.
Precisely. Couldn't say it better. Thank you for sharing your sources and letting us delve into this really important topic today.
Absolutely.
We really encourage you, the listener, to maybe reflect on your own experiences with plateaus. Think about how you might apply some of these insights next time you feel stuck. And just remember, consistent effort and a positive perspective are incredibly powerful allies on any journey.
And maybe on that thought, here's something to ponder. How might truly embracing these plateaus, not fighting them, but viewing them as necessary, even useful stages of growth, how might that ultimately lead you to a deeper understanding and perhaps a more sustainable, more meaningful success in whatever it is you're pursuing? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Kei and Leo are here to help you grow. Don't forget to subscribe.